Alright, welcome to AP Environmental Science. This video will be your introduction to environmental science. By the completion of this video, you should be able to define the field of environmental science and discuss its importance, identify ways in which humans have altered and continue to alter our environment, and identify key environmental indicators and their trends over time. So let's start off by figuring out the goal of environmental science by answering the question, what is the goal of environmental science? So like many sciences or all sciences, we want to know how nature works. So we want to know what's going on in the world around us. We also want to know how the environment is affecting us and how we or humans are having an impact on our environment. And we also want to know how we can live more sustainably without degrading our environment, which is our life support system. In this course of environmental science, we will be looking at a few environmental issues, including population growth. We know that our human population has grown exponentially, and this growing population is causing or having detrimental effects on our planet. We have an increase in resource use, destruction to our habitats or animal habitats, premature extinction, issues of poverty, as well as pollution, and these will all be studied throughout the course of this semester. This diagram here is just showing you a few major environmental problems such as waste pollution, food supply problems, biodiversity depletion, air pollution, and water pollution. And if we think back to the source of all these environmental problems, we're going to look at humans and our growing human population. And we'll talk a little bit about these later on. But before we begin, how about you take a moment and look around yourself? I want for you to observe your surroundings. So think about the air you're breathing, the heating and cooling system that's keeping you comfortable, the natural or artificial light that's helping you see. All these things are your current environment. It's where you are, things that are around you. Our environment is the sum of all of the conditions surrounding us that influence our lives. These conditions include living organisms, non-living components such as soil, temperature, and water. The influence of humans is an important part of the environment as well. The environment we live in is going to be what determines how healthy we are, how fast we're going to grow, how easy it is for us to move around, and even how much food we have access to and can obtain. So, environments can be strikingly different from one to another. So you could have a hot, dry desert versus a cool, humid tropical rainforest, or a coral reef that has lots and lots and lots of marine life. And then you can have a crowded city street. These are all going to be very different environments. So, for instance, the environment that we live in here in eastern North Carolina is going to be a whole lot different from the environment of someone who lives in Alaska, or someone who lives in Russia, or someone who lives in Hawaii or in the Amazon. These are all completely different environments because our surroundings, the things that are going to be influencing our life, are going to be different. We also want to make sure we distinguish between environmental science and environmentalism. We know that environmental science is an interdisciplinary science, and we're going to be studying the interactions among human systems and those found in nature. By system, we're going to be talking about any set of interacting components that are going to influence each other. But when we want to talk about environmentalism, we want to make sure you know that that's a social movement that's going to be seeking to protect our environment. So those are two different things. So we've already said all these things here. We talked about how the environment is our surroundings. So if someone asks you, what is your environment? You're going to say, it's my surroundings, the things that are influencing my life, the things that are interacting, such as the living things, which are biotic, and the abiotic or non-living things. So some examples of those biotic things are going to be the plants, animals, fungi, forests, and trees, and things that are around you. The non-living things could be your soil, the temperature, the water, the air. But your environment is also going to include human or man-made creations such as buildings, roadways. All these different things are going to be your environment, as well as your social relationships and the different institutions that influence you. Excuse me. Many environmental scientists are going to study a specific type of natural system, which is known as an ecosystem. An ecosystem is pretty much a particular location on Earth that has interacting components that include the living things, or biotic, and the non-living components, such as your abiotic components. So humans are also going to alter these natural systems or ecosystems. Think of the last time you walked in a wooded area. Did you notice any dead or fallen leaves? Chances are that even if you did, you were not aware that the living and non-living components were interacting all around you. For instance, maybe an insect pest killed the tree that you saw, and many others from the exact same species. Over time, the dead trees in a forest, they're going to lose their moisture. The increase in dry wood in the forest makes it more vulnerable to wildfires. But this is not going to be where it's going to end at. The wildfires may trigger the germination of a certain seed, and some of those which may have lied dormant for a certain amount of time until after the fire. And so what began with the activity of insects that led to, it's going to lead to, I'm sorry, what began with those insects causing those trees to die led to a transformation in the forest. In this way, biotic factors interact with abiotic factors and influence the future of the forest. All of these factors are part of the system. Humans are going to manipulate these systems far more than any other species. We change our environment in ways that aren't fully understood. So we change the chemistry of our air, our water, and soil, and we do this both intentionally and we do it unintentionally. So, for instance, intentionally, we add fertilizer to our soil, but unintentionally, we have activities that are going to generate pollution, which is going to change our environment. We also convert land from its natural state into urban, suburban, and agricultural areas. Even where we do not manipulate the environment directly, the simple fact that we are there and that there are so many of us is going to affect our surroundings. Humans and our direct ancestors have lived on our planet for about 2.5 million years. During this time, especially during the last 10,000 to about 20,000 years, we've shaped and influenced our environment drastically. The number of people that live on our planet has grown and their effect has multiplied. 6,000 people can live in an area. Let me change that. 6,000 people can live in a relatively small area with only minimal impact or impacts on the environment. But when roughly 4 million people live in a modern city like Los Angeles, which you're looking at here, I think the top picture is from the 1800s or 1880s, and the bottom picture is from 2013. When we have this many people, about 4 million people living in a modern city like Los Angeles, their combined activity is going to cause for environmental damage that would inevitably pollute the water, pollute the air, pollute the soil, and it's also going to have a lot of other adverse consequences. Scientists monitor natural systems for signs of stress. One critical question that environmental scientists investigate is whether the planet's natural life support systems are being degraded by human induced changes. So, we want to know, are our natural resources being hurt by what we are doing to our planet? So, our natural environment provides what we refer to as ecosystem services, which are clean water, timber, fish, as well as crops. Although Although we often take a healthy ecosystem for granted, we do know when an ecosystem is degraded or stressed because it is then unable to provide us with the same services and produce the same goods that it was producing for us before it became damaged. In order to understand the extent of our effect on the environment, we're going to need to be able to measure the health of Earth's ecosystems. And we do that by looking at certain environmental indicators, which are going to describe the current state of our environment. We have 5 global indicators that we look at. Those are biological or biodiversity, food production, the average global surface temperature, and global carbon dioxide concentrations in the atmosphere, our human population, as well as resource depletion, so how resources being used. And here's a chart of those 5, or a table showing you those 5 key global indicators, their recent trends, the outlook for the future, as well as their overall impact on environmental quality. So the first indicator we're going to look at is biodiversity or biological diversity. This is going to look at the diversity of all the different life forms in an environment. So biological or biodiversity exists in 3 different scales. Those are going to be ecosystem diversity, genetic diversity, and species diversity. The first one we're going to look at is genetic diversity. So genetic diversity is a measure of the genetic variations among individuals in a population. So a population with a high genetic diversity is going to be better able to respond to an environmental change than a population with a lower genetic diversity. For example, if a population of fish possesses a high genetic diversity for disease resistance, at least some individuals are going to be likely to survive whatever diseases move through the population. Whereas if you had a population with a low diversity to disease resistance, when a disease came through, many of those populations or many of those fish would be wiped out. The next one is species diversity, which is going to indicate the number of species in a region or a particular place or type of habitat. Scientists have observed that ecosystems with more species or higher species diversity is going to be more productive and resilient and able to recover from turbulence. For example, a population or a tropical rainforest with a large number of plant species growing in the understory is going to be more likely to be productive and better able to withstand change than a nearby tropical forest plantation with only one crop species growing in the understory, if that makes sense to you. So the greater the number of tree species there, the more productive that forest is. Scientists, environmental scientists often focus on species diversity as a critical environmental indicator. The number of frog species, for example, is used as an indicator of regional environmental health because frogs are exposed to both water and air in their ecosystem. A decreased number of frogs in a particular ecosystem may be an indicator of an environmental problem there. But not all species lost are indicators of environmental problems. However, species arise and others go extinct as part of the natural evolutionary process. Um, Evolution of new species is known as speciations, and this typically happens very slowly, perhaps on the order of 1 to 3 new species per year worldwide. And then the rate at which species go extinct over a long period of time is known as background background extinction, the background extinction rate. And this is also usually very slow, and it's about one species in a million every year. And then finally, when we're talking about biodiversity or biological diversity, we need to look at ecosystem diversity, which is a diversity, excuse me, ecosystem diversity is a measure of the diversity of ecosystems or habitats that exist in a given region. A greater number of healthy and productive ecosystems means that you're going to have a healthier environment overall. Some measures of biodiversity are given in terms of land area, so becoming familiar with measurements of land area is important to understanding them. A hectare is a unit of area used primarily in the measurement of land. It represents 100 meters by 100 meters. In the United States, we measure land area in terms of miles and acres. However, the rest of the world measures it in hectares. So, therefore, we need to know how to convert between hectares and acres. So, in this example, I'm first going to show you or let you see how to convert from hectares to acres. And it looks like I've already popped the answer up there accidentally, and I don't know how I did that. But this is how we do it. There are 2.7 acres in 1 hectare. The conversion from hectares is relatively easy to do without a calculator. All you have to do is round to two significant figures, and it gives you 2.5 acres in 1 hectare. So, your question here: if a nature preserve is 100 hectares, what is its size in acres? What you have to do is you have to convert from hectares to acres by multiplying 100 hectares by 2.5 acres, and that gives you 250 acres. Fairly simple to do. So I want you to take a moment here to pause the video, and I want you to work out this problem in your lab notebook. A particular forest is 10,000 acres. Determine its size in hectares. So go ahead and take a moment to pause here and work out that problem. So one of the most comprehensive scientific assessments of the condition of the world's ecological systems is the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment. This assessment has four major findings, and those are that humans have drastically altered ecosystems. These changes have these changes or alters. I'm sorry, I don't. Where am I going here? So these changes have contributed to human well-being and economic development, but this is all has like had a cost. So that means pretty much we're degrading our environment. And we also know, due to this assessment, that environmental degradation could get much worse, but it can be reversed, and this reversal is going to require some work on our part. So, the second of our five global indicators is food production, or our ability to grow food to nourish the human population. Just as a healthy ecosystem supports a wide range of species, a healthy soil is going to support abundant and continuous food production. So, in order for us to have a lot of food or food supply that can feed our world, we need to have healthy soil. Food grains such as wheat, corn, and rice provide more than half of the calories and protein humans consume. Still, the growth of the human population is straining our ability to distribute adequate amounts of foods, or food, not foods. We use science and technology to increase the amount of food that we can produce on a given area of land. So, for example, we've expanded irrigation, we have fertilization, we have new crop varieties, and these are all things that have come along within the last century. So, if we look at this chart here, it's showing you the world grain production or production per year. And you can see that grain production has increased since the 1950s, but it has recently begun to level off. The next global indicator is the average global surface temperature and carbon dioxide concentrations in our atmosphere. So we know that biodiversity and abundant food production are necessary for us to live. But one of the things that makes those things possible is having a stable climate on our planet. Earth's temperature has been relatively constant since the earliest forms of life began on our planet about 3.5 billion years ago. And the temperature of Earth allows for us to have the presence of water in the liquid form, which is necessary for us to live, because we know without water, there's going to be no life on our planet. So what is actually keeping Earth's temperature so constant? Why isn't it changing drastically? And the main thing the thing that does this is because we have a thick planetary atmosphere that contains many gases, and some of these gases or atmospheric gases trap heat near Earth's surface. These are known as greenhouse gases. The most important greenhouse gas we have is carbon dioxide, or CO2. During most of the history of life on Earth, greenhouse gases have been present in the atmosphere, and it's been at a fairly constant concentration, and it's remained relatively constant for long periods of time. But in the past 2 centuries, that concentration of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases in our atmosphere has risen. And if you look at the diagram here, you can see in the past 200 years, you see that the concentrations of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere are increasing, and along with it, the blue line is showing you the carbon dioxide, but the red line is showing you the global temperatures. And as that carbon dioxide concentration is increasing, more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, you're also getting these global temperatures to increase. Things that make you go, hmm. Many scientists believe that the increase in atmospheric carbon dioxide over the last 200 years has been anthropogenic. So that means that it's being caused by humans or human activity. The two major sources of this anthropogenic or human caused carbon dioxide are going to be the combustion of fossil fuels, because we're driving cars, we love to drive our cars, as well as from deforestation. So we have a net loss of forests and other habitats that would otherwise take up and store some of this carbon dioxide in our atmosphere. But now we've cut down all of these trees to build our homes and buildings and roadways. And on those roads, we're driving our cars, putting out all this carbon dioxide, and these carbon dioxide concentrations in our atmosphere are increasing, and it's being linked to an increase in global temperature. In addition to biodiversity, food production, and our global temperatures and carbon dioxide concentrations in our atmosphere, the size of our human population tells us a whole lot about the health of our planet and our global environment. Our population on our planet is about 7.2 billion people, and we're getting an additional million people every 5 days. That's about 32,000 people a day. Most scientists project that the human population will be somewhere between 8.1 billion and 9.6 billion in the year 2050, but will then stabilize between 7.1 and 10.5 billion by the year 2100. Can the planet sustain so many people? That's the question we want to know. And even if the human population stops growing, these billions of additional people are going to take up a greater demand on the Earth's finite resources. And these resources are our food, our energy, our land, and we just don't have that much space. So, what's going to happen to these resources? Are we going to be fighting over them? What's going to be going on? But why are there so many humans? So, it all started back during the agricultural revolution when we got stable food supplies. No more did you have to go and chase behind a herd of animals and go out and hunt and gather, hunt for your deer, hunt and bear, hunt whatever you wanted to eat, and bring it back. You have a stable food supply. You begin to grow crops. You begin to raise your own livestock. And then in the Industrial Revolution, we began to be able to produce more food because we had more technology, and we became urbanized, and we began to use fossil fuels. That's where the problem started, or burn more fossil fuels. All of these things cause for our population to begin to grow because we had more food with all this new technology. Our death rates were being decreased because people weren't starving to death. We had medicines to keep people from dying when they got sick, and it caused for an increase in our net growth rate of our human population. And this is just showing you a picture of a very crowded city. So just a reminder, the human population will continue to grow for at least 50 more years. Unless humans can devise a way to live more sustainably, these population increases will put additional strain on natural systems. And I think this picture is from Kolkata, or Kolkata. Can't remember how to pronounce that. All right, so let's talk about our natural resources. So our natural resources are going to be those things that provide us energy and other things that we need for survival. So we know we have renewable natural resources such as your sunlight, wind, water, geothermal energy, and we also have, non-renewable resources such as coal, oil, natural gas, our mineral resources. These are all non-renewable things that we're not going to get back once they run out. As our human population grows, the resources necessary for our survival will become increasingly depleted. In addition, extracting those natural resources can affect the health of our environment in many, many ways. Pollution and land degradation caused by mining, waste from discarded manufactured products, and air pollution from fossil fuel combustion are just a few of those negative environmental consequences of resource extraction and use. So when we're extracting all these resources, we're having a few negative impacts on our planet. Patterns of resource consumption do vary enormously among nations depending upon their level of development. And we talk about development, we're talking about the improvement of a nation and human well being through economic advances. As economies develop, resources resource consumption also increases. So you're going to have people driving more cars, we're living in larger homes, and we're purchasing more goods because we have more money. According to the United Nations Development Program, people that live in developed nations, so places like the United States, Canada, Australia, a lot of the European countries, and Japan, use most of the world's resources. So if you take a look at this figure here on the picture or the diagram, the green is showing you the resources used by people in developed countries, and the tan is showing you resource used by people in developing countries. Only 20% of the world's population lives in developed countries, but that 20% uses most of the world's resources. The remaining 80% of the population lives in developing countries and uses far fewer resources per capita or per person. So you look at, for automobile and truck use, you have 87% being used by 20% of the population. And that's a lot of resources used by a small amount of people. Since we are talking about depletion, let's look at a math problem on rates of forest clearing, since we have to clear forests sometime in order to get to those resources in order for them to be depleted. And I know how much you love the first math problems. Let's go a little bit deeper with this one. It's still going to be a dimensional analysis, but there are going to be a few more steps you're going to have to do. So a web search of environmental organizations yielded a range of estimates of the amount of forest clearing that is occurring worldwide. Estimate 1, you have 1 acre per second. Estimate 2, 80,000 acres per day. Estimate 3, 32,000 hectares per day. So what we want for you to do is to convert the first two estimates into hectares per year and compare them. We do know that there are 2.47 acres per hectare, and we know that we can round that number to 2.5. Therefore, we're going to get that 1 acre is going to be equal to 0.40 hectares. So let's start by converting estimate 1, which we had 1 acre per second, and let's see if we can convert that on down to hectares per year. So we're going to start off by multiplying 1 acre per second by 0.40 hectares per acre. Acres are going to cancel out, and we're left with excuse me, acres are going to cancel out, and we're going to be left with hectares per second, and that's going to give us 0.40 hectares per second. But we don't want hectares per second, we want hectares per year. So we're going to multiply 0.40 hectares per second by 60 seconds per minute by 60 minutes per hour by 24 hours per day by 365 days per year. Everything is going to cancel out except for hectares and years, and you're going to be left with 12,614,400 acres per year being cleared. Now let's go ahead and do the same thing for estimate 2. So they gave it to us in acres per year. We're going to use the same conversion factor. We had 80,000 acres per day times 0.40 acres or hectares per acre. That gives us 32,000 hectares per day. Remember, we don't want hectares per day. We want our answer to be in hectares per year. But we stopped right here because I want you to take a look at estimate 3. You notice it's 32,000 hectares per day. That's the same as what we got right now. So I'm going to stop this problem right here, and I'm going to let you finish it. Since we already know that estimate 2 and estimate 3 are identical once you convert it to hectares, I want you to now convert that estimate of 32,000 hectares per day. How much larger? I also want to know how much larger is estimate 1 than estimate 2. And I want to know why might environmental organizations or anyone else for that matter choose to present information or present similar information in different ways. Go ahead and pause the video right here and take a moment to work this problem in your lab notebook. So by studying environmental science, we can help to avoid mistakes that have been made by past civilizations. Easter Island in the South Pacific provides us a cautionary tale. The island, also known as Rapa Nui, was once covered with trees and grasses. When humans settled the island many hundreds of years ago, they quickly multiplied in its hospitable environment. They cut down the trees to build homes and to make canoes for fishing, but they also overused the island's soil and water resources. By the 1870s, almost all the trees were gone. Without the trees to hold the soil in place, they had lots and lots of massive erosion. And the loss of soil caused for their food production to decrease, while other forces, including disease that was introduced by European visitors, were also involved in destruction of the population. The unsustainable use of natural resources on Easter Island is what appears to have been the primary cause of the collapse of its civilization. So by studying environmental science, we hope that we were able to avoid the same mistakes that they made on Easter Island. And that concludes this video on your introduction to environmental science.